A number of D.C. residents are pushing back against the federal government's takeover of the city's police department, protesting the city's increased police presence as it enters its second week. It comes as the White House has reported more than 300 arrests have been made since the start of the expanded police operations. On Friday, the D.C. Attorney General sued the White House, saying the government has overstepped its authority. The Trump administration has since relented a bit. Attorney General Pam Bondi rescinded her decision to replace the D.C. Police Chief Department with the head of the Drug Enforcement Agency. Meanwhile, the Republican governors of West Virginia, South Carolina and Ohio all announced over the weekend that they're going to be sending troops from their states to the Capitol. There are already more than 850 National Guard members in Washington, D.C. Two U.S. officials tell NBC News at least some of these troops will now be armed. Joe, we're starting to hear much more around the city of people seeing the troops, seeing the National Guard troops, seeing incidents like the one we're going to talk about. It's becoming something that over the weekend, I think, that the presence has been felt much more intensely than it was last week.
Well, Kathy also reports that they're not going to high crime areas.
Right.
We've seen them at the Washington Monument. We've seen them in DuPont Circle. We've seen them in Georgetown. Why aren't they going to the places where there are actually residents in high crime areas who would actually welcome more police protection? I mean, that's
that's meant to be the aim of all of this, right?
Right. It seems they're going to safer, higher profile places. And I must say, John Heilemann, again, this is something that I've talked about. Partnership, if you can have a partnership with D.C., something I've been talking about for 35 years, because D.C. has been a high crime area. It's also been a place where the quality of life has not been as good as it should be over the past 3 decades or so. But when you start hearing of governors from other states talking about bringing their National Guard troops in, it's hilarious. As Gavin Newsom brought up over the weekend, and I checked it out, and the numbers seem to be right. Speaker Mike Johnson's own Monroe, Louisiana, has higher crime rates per capita, higher violence crime rates per capita than Washington, D.C. and San Francisco, California. Let me say that again. Speaker Mike Johnson's home district with Monroe, Louisiana, has higher crime rates per capita than Washington, D.C.
Well, in the top 10 in the country, of the places that Trump has been, Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., not in the top 10. Of the places he's talked about going, one, Baltimore, is number 10. The top nine
red states.
The top 9 are red cities and red states with red mayors.
Yeah,
Republican mayors. That's that I think exposes the rationale here as being this is all about symbolism in politics and not about actually dealing with the problem that a lot of places have, which is with crime and particularly with violent crime. It's not to say there's not a problem in Washington, D.C. There are many of these cities, there's too much crime. We all acknowledge that, but not the kind of crime that there are more effective policing strategies, more cops on the beat. There are lots of things you can say about how some of these cities need to do a lot of work to get better with crime. But most of them have nothing to do with deploying the National Guard, none of whom are trained to do domestic law enforcement. That is not what they're trained to do. They have things they're very good at. This is not one of them.
Well, and again, Rev, what I've been saying all along is, yes, let's have a partnership between the federal government and Washington, D.C. Because as Maureen Dowd points out, Democrats running around saying Washington, D.C. is safe. That's the wrong answer.
Right.
People in Washington, D.C. don't feel safe unless they're richer. And if you look at the polls, wider. If you look at Washington, D.C. residents, according to the latest Washington Post poll, shows that people of color actually want higher police presence because they say crime is a very important issue. The top of that list, black women don't feel secure in their own city. So let's figure out how the federal government can provide the assets that Washington, D.C. needs. But as Maureen said in her column, which we're going to read in a minute, talking about Washington, D.C. being safe doesn't mean a whole lot to people in Washington, D.C. who see crime every day. And Washington, D.C.'s crime rates, while lower, Maureen Dowd points out, those rates are about where New York City's were in the 1990s at their worst. So, yeah, there are things that can be done. Bringing National Guardsmen in from red states in some areas that have higher crime per capita than Washington, D.C., not the answer.
Not the answer, and it really, in many ways, perverts the concern that many of the black residents in D.C. and elsewhere have. One, yes, there is a crime problem. It is not as bad as it was, but it is still bad. And I think that if you had a blended strategy, it could work effectively. But how do you feel if you're a resident of Washington, D.C., in a high crime area, and you're black, and I have an Office of National Action Network there, people work there that I'm talking to that have that fear, and I'm in and out of Washington. And you bring in the National Guard and you send them to the Washington Monument and Lincoln Memorial and DuPont Circle and Georgetown.
Because there is an Apple store.
Right.
Yeah, maybe there's
I mean, I'm supposed to feel better.
And the National Guard from like West Virginia and Ohio.
So now you're insulted on top of being concerned because you have all this ruckus. You even talk about displacing the police chief, and you dispatch the National Guard and bring in people from other states to areas that don't face the crime problem. So this clearly looks racial and political.
They really need, John, to send whatever additional help the federal government wants to send. They need to send them to the wards that have the highest crime rates.
The Washington Post has a map online right now that shows where they have spotted National Guard members. They're not in those areas. They are in the high-profile areas to have footage for the news. They are not there in the areas that need them. So let's read a little bit of what Maureen Dowd wrote in her latest column for the New York Times, headlined, "Criminal Fights Crime." Quote, "City officials and many liberal residents are outraged about Trump's painting D.C. as a hellscape and flooding the zone with law enforcement and troops. It's ridiculous to drag FBI agents from their desks to be cops on the beat. It is also true that many D.C. residents are secretly glad to see more uniforms. No matter what statistics say, they don't feel safe. Trump is playing the savior on crime when he's the biggest scofflaw in town, first inciting the mob on January 6th, and then pardoning felons who broke into the Capitol and beat up police officers. While the district's homicide rate has fallen, it's almost as high as New York's at its most dangerous in 1990. The diva of distraction is putting on a show. But progressives should not fall into Trump's trap and play down crime, once more getting on the wrong side of an inflammatory issue. As with inflation, they should remember that personal experiences count more than sanguine statistics. Even if Trump is being diabolical, Democrats should not pretend everything is fine here, Joe, because it's not.
Right, and Maureen starts a story about her sister's car being stolen, her calling the police, and they're like,
Yeah. Oh, look, the question.
we can't do anything about it, and then, calls the police again when she's found it. They're like, we can't do anything.
It is not a good idea politically, to your point, to Maureen Dowd's point, to fight the emotions and the fears of real people who have those real fears and emotions. The question, Rev, as you point out, is, okay, so who's this for? And if you think about it through the lens of theater and photo opportunities and insult, another word that was used, well, it's pretty clear that this is, of course, politics. And when you watch these videos, Joe, of the delivery guy, of just like random people on the street being surrounded by 6 different agencies, I think, man, I don't think people are yearning for a reckoning to be visited upon their delivery person. Right. And even more to the point, it feels degrading to the officers who are being asked to do this. It just feels beneath them as law enforcement agents in a first world country, the vanguard of, I don't know, a sophisticated place, to feel like, oh, we're just being used as these props by a third world kind of approach to what policing even supposed to be. And to me, that feels like a far more effective thing to keep on pointing out, as opposed to, crime's not a big deal here. It's
Right.
how are you doing it, and why are you making it so that everybody feels worse off for it?
Well, how are you doing it? And Caddy, again, where are you doing it? Send reinforcements to high crime areas and not, the mall.
Yeah, I mean, you look at neighborhoods, Ward 7, Ward 8 in the city have much higher crime rates than Ward 2 and Ward 3. Those are the Georgetown Northwest neighborhoods. But those high crime rates neighborhoods are not seeing this surge in either military or police presence at the moment. That